Hello, everyone.
Hey.
Thank you so much for attending our first webinar of the SOQM, the Student Organization of Qualitative Methodologies at the University of South Florida. So it's such an honor having you all here with us today. And I'm so excited seeing this room full. So today we received a lot of questions, so we are pretty excited. And we try to, first, my name is Michelle Angelo Rocha. I'm from Brazil, and I'm a PhD candidate in educational leadership and policies at the University of South Florida. And also want to introduce Catherine and Nara. We are part of the organization, so if you can introduce yourself very quickly, just for they can get to know you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Catherine Hull, and I am a PhD student in education in literacy studies.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nada Baghdadi. I'm an international student from Saudi Arabia, and I'm the treasurer for SOQM. My PhD program is TESLA, the Technology in Education and Second Language Acquisition.
Awesome. So I want to introduce you. I don't want to speak too much, so we receive a lot of questions and I love this. So we are going to spend a lot of time answering your questions because that's our goal here. Our goal is to help you during this process. I am during this process too, and I know how hard it is to write your dissertation, create a literature review, and we are here to help each other, to support each other. So I want to introduce our guest speakers today. Is Dr. Queshonda Kudaisi. She's Associate Professor of Mathematics Education at the University of North Texas, the College of Education, and also Dr. Omar Salaam. He's a PhD in Educational Leadership, and he is an independent adult educator. I'm not going to talk a lot about them. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So thank you so much, and thank you, Queshonda and Omar, for coming and talk to us today. So who wants to introduce first?
I'm going to go first. Good afternoon, evening to everyone. I'm just going to give a little bit of background on who I am. My expectation is that when folks saw my name and that I'm a graduate of USF, you've already looked up my dissertation and whatever information you could find. So as opposed to reiterating a bunch of information you've probably already read up on, I'll just share a little bit of my history, which is being born and raised in Flint, Michigan. Every time you hear anything about Flint, Michigan in the news, it's probably not too good. But I am a very proud Flintstone, and also very relieved that I'm not there suffering through all the rough times Flint continues to go through. From leaving Flint, I got my bachelor's at Bethune-Cookman College then, now university. So very proud to have gotten my roots built at a historically Black college / university. And then from there, eventually decided to go back from teaching. I went directly into teaching music. And then I went back to get a master's basically due to the fact that I had leadership that I felt wasn't high enough quality, so I wanted the same degree as them. And after getting a master's degree, used that to go into an assistant principal position down in Florida. It still wasn't far enough. I've always wanted to find out what it's like to live abroad. And so I took that opportunity and went abroad. And while I was abroad, long story short, I found out firsthand that even though racism here in America is a whole different flavor, it still exists globally. And I was watching and witnessing opportunities being presented to people who are not of color, just that were less qualified than me. And so my wife and I, we decided, oh yeah, I met my wife over in Malaysia. So we decided to come back here and for me to pursue a PhD. Not because I have any high aspirations or think so highly of the degree itself. I personally know from my bachelor's degree that having a PhD does not make a person any smarter than the next person. It just makes you highly educated in the particular area that you're focused in. But I went back for a PhD, and got the PhD, and then still found out that opportunities were still not opening up to me and decided to leave education after being an assistant principal and a principal for an extended period of time, working in 6 different countries. And so my most recent venture is a brand new career where I'm working independently for the federal government right now and enjoying it, actually getting paid and getting some good benefits and putting my degrees in education to good use and in an area where it's not the same as actually being in schools, where anyone who works in schools knows the lack of appreciation in America for educators. So that's a quick synopsis. I didn't jot things down. It was pushing for crunch time to make sure I was here on time with you guys. So I hope I covered minimal enough time so that we have time for questions. And also, just if you see me not looking at the screen when I answer some of the earlier questions, it's because I've jotted down, typed up some answers to the questions to keep from going on and on too long, because I want to make sure to get we have the opportunity to answer as many of the questions that have been posted as possible. So I'm very glad to be on here. Nice to reconnect with USF. Go Bulls.
Go Bulls. So thank you so much and for sharing a little bit about your story. And with you, Queshonda.
Thank you, Michelle. And again, thank you for inviting me to be a part of this. I'm going to start off with saying go Bulls. I also graduated from USF. So I started my, I graduated from Southeastern University in Florida. And I was actually a career changer. So my bachelor's degree is actually not in education, it's in theology. But when I graduated, I needed to get a job. So I decided to become a math teacher. So while teaching, I decided that I really loved it. So I went on to get my master's degree at USF in teaching. And then later on, so in 2016, I completed my master's at USF, and then I entered the PhD program in 2018 at USF. And then recently graduated in the fall of 2021. So my degree was in curriculum and instruction with a focus in mathematics education and a cognate in leadership. So that's kind of how I hooked up with Michelle. My research was in social justice and mathematics and how those two intersect with each other and how we can incorporate that into the math class. So I researched how pre-service teachers were learning to do that in the mathematics program that they were being prepared in. This is my 9th year in education. So I'm starting as an assistant professor at UNT. And I think that's pretty much it. My dissertation was mixed method. So I did qual and quantitative. And yeah, I think that's it. So that's a little bit about me, but we'll, I'll answer any other questions that I can address. So
What I love about Queshonda is because during the process of writing her dissertation, she was pregnant. She's like kind of my hero. Like she was an example of I can finish these. Like if all the things that she was doing, taking care of her children and being pregnant and finish her dissertation, we can do this too, guys. So yes. Okay, we're gonna So we organized your questions. We got all your questions. They appreciated that. So now what we are going to do is I'm going to go and I'm going to read the questions. So they're going to answer you. Okay. So, and after the end, we are going to take like 30 minutes to ask your questions. Please feel free to type or to raise your hand. Actually, I prefer if you raise your hand and you ask yourself, because that's a way we can interact more with each other. So the first question that we received was, using qualitative data analysis software, did you use any kind of software to assist your literature review? How was it? How was your process?
Okay, I guess I'm going first. Yeah, I didn't like it myself. I'm not really a person who's into technology. but I do have OCD. I'm like a highly organized person. I mean, to the point where anything that's on my desk, I can tell when somebody's been there because the pencil needs to lay a certain way with the numbers so I can see them and the letters. So I'm like really, really organized. So therefore I organized everything myself. And then later in the process, I made some connections with some people through networking and did try using some software, and it just wasn't for me. And I let it go and stuck with the system that I had created and built for myself.
And for me, I wouldn't necessarily call this qualitative software, but I did use a reference manager that kind of served as a qualitative software. So Michelle, if you don't mind, I can share my screen.
Yes, you have the permission.
Okay, let's see. So I use Mendeley. So Mendeley is a reference manager, but it's also a way for you to organize your documents. So this is sort of this is the home page. So let me click library. Hopefully this is gonna work. Of course, it probably won't because we're on Zoom. Okay, but this is all of the references that I have. But if you see over here, there's like little collections that you can make. And so if I scroll down, each of these collections serve as a folder. And it's grown since I did my literature review. I went on to use it for my dissertation, and then I used it for everything at that point. But like, for example, one of the topics in my literature review was, let me see if I can find something. So social justice lesson plans, right? So this was just one of the articles that was in my social justice lesson plan, but that's not, let me find a better example. Let's see.
I'm not intentionally giving props or shout outs to Mendeley, but that is the one that I ended up using the most when I was trying to go that route.
Here we go, dissertation.
Me too, kind of helped me so much.
There we go. So lesson examination. So these are the 4 studies that I looked at as one piece of my dissertation literature review. And so those articles are there, but then I can go into the article and then I can highlight and make notes. So you see my highlights there. And so this is just one of the, well, this is the only software that I use to organize my literature review. So I highly, highly recommend Mendeley, especially because it's free. You know, and sometimes free don't necessarily mean good, but I can truly say that Mendeley is a really good software to use to organize your documents, to make notes in them, and to put articles under whatever themes you develop.
Awesome. So another question is, the best easy way to go about my literature, having downloads tons of articles, dissertations, and books, also arrange, analyze, and synthesize for my literature review. So how did you organize yourself feeling so overwhelmed?
Well, knowing that we can't change the past, it depends on where you are in the process. If you're at the very start, the advice I give is to make sure you organize from the very start. That's the most ideal. Option 2, otherwise, start with the literature review most closely related to your exact same subject. So start to look at the references and find references of the literature that most closely relates to your subject or your topic, and then branch out to literature from authors that have to the authors that they reference, and then continue branching out from there. Another good strong piece of advice is to skim everything you read, as opposed to getting so bogged down that you're spending days at a time reading one thing or 2 things. Try to read through and get the gist of what's being talked about without spending a long period of time on just 1 or 2 articles or books or chapters. Highlight as you go, as you read, whatever jumps out to you, make notes of it, because later on when you go back to it, you don't want to be spending a bunch of time trying to figure out what was the main thing that I liked about this, or what were the parts I really wanted to possibly quote or paraphrase.
Thank you.
And I agree with what Omar said. It's being organized from the beginning. I would like to offer a way to organize your work. Like Omar said, scamming is really important. One of the things I use to even organize that a little bit further is when I am reading the articles, because it's so easy to get lost and go down a rabbit trail. So what I do when I'm reading articles is I look for certain things. And so this is an example of a table that's filled in, but what I look for is the type of article that it is. So if it's dissertation, if it's empirical, if it's theoretical, then I just paste the summary here, which you could also just paste the abstract. I capture the research question, the methodology used, the main results from the study, which is really the same as the findings, but sometimes they have a separate conclusion section, so I'll copy that in there. And then I look specifically for what gaps did they identify, because some of the questions asked about, like, how do I even know like what research questions to ask? So a lot of the times where you can start is, where are other researchers identifying gaps at? And how can I take that up based on my interests? And then finally, the limitations. And then sometimes they have a specific section where it says future research, where you can copy that further. So that was one of the ways that I kind of captured, that was my skimming way of not having to read through everything, but just sort of doing a controlled find where you look for that particular information in the article. And I can provide a link to this for anybody that wants it.
Sweet. I'm glad you said that about the link, because that's exactly what a student, somebody did for me when they presented the same thing working on mine. And then I used that template and I took certain things out, or I put certain things in, I add certain columns, I took some out, and it looked very much like what you have right there. I'm just not as connected with that world since I left academia.
Yeah.
So I didn't think of it. When I saw it, I was like, oh yeah, I had one of those.
Right.
Actually, I do that too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really helpful. And you can even print it out. Like once I had it filled up, like once I was finished with this phase, I actually printed it out so I could look at it further and make notes and etc. So I think that can be really helpful.
Yeah, and it's really good to help you really realize what goes with what, because you change up the order of everything. You put things that are, just like with anything in Excel, you can filter it by one thing or filter it by something else. And the different ways you filter it, you can group things in different ways, which can really help you to change your path on exactly how you want your literature review to flow, because you may have it flowing one way and then find that you actually want to change the flow in another direction. So you want to group them in a different manner. So that's another way that what she's presenting to you is very useful.
Mm-hmm.
So do you have any advice about developing a reading habit that allows you to read enough for the literature review?
The term enough gives the feeling to me of aiming for a minimum, which to me is not ideal. However, it's good to at least know whatever the minimum is expected by your committee. But once I confirmed the minimum expectations of my committee, I just kept that info to the side to make sure that I hit that, but not just trying to make that the goal and feel like, okay, I've hit it, I'm done. That should just be something that you should make sure that you surpass, but not just trying to hit that and stop. I'm not really a reader. Like when I first sat down to interview and they asked me, what have I read recently? I was like, uh-oh, because I'm not really into reading. If I'm reading for pleasure. So being in a doctoral program where you have to read for the purpose of your studies was a whole new thing. But my intent on reading was to gather as much info as possible to guide the development of my literature review, followed by keeping track of all of it. I'm going back to what I said before. I was highlighting from day one. I took the advice that was given to me in that very first class to heart, and I started highlighting any and everything I was reading. And since I'm not really into reading anyway, I was skimming, trying to only get to the main things I wanted to focus on. And through doing that, I really I improved my skimming skills by doing it more and more and more, because you want to avoid wearing your eyes out I wasn't wearing glasses when I started my PhD program. And you notice I keep taking them off. I don't wear them to see. I only read them. I'm only putting them on to see these small fonts on here. But yeah, you don't want to wear your eyes out, and you also don't want to wear your body out, because you have a life, you got a family, and you're working on a PhD and you got a job. So the last thing you want to do is wear yourself out. So try to perfect the art of skimming and focus only on what's the most important. That's what I would say in regards to reading. Don't wear yourself out. This whole process is going to beat you down enough. Don't wear yourself out trying to read everything all the time. Just pace yourself.
Right. Thanks for that, Omar. For me, I would say two things. So the first thing is I agree. I do not enjoy reading at all. Because it's for me, I feel like when I skim, I feel like I'm missing something, first of all. So I feel like I have to read the whole thing. So I had to really get good at, skimming, because you really do need to do that to be able to get through all of the reading that you need to do. But what I did was I listened to the articles. So there's an app that I use, which I'm not going to show. I'm just going to put the link, but it's called Natural Readers. It's an online reader where you can upload PDFs and you can just listen to the article. And so even if it's right in front of you, you don't necessarily have to follow along with your eyes. You can kind of take notes, or you can be folding laundry or taking care of the kids, or driving to class, or whatever other thing you need to do, just to kind of get a sense of the article. So that's one strategy I use. And then another strategy when it comes to reading is, I don't say that I want to read 10 articles. Yes, it's free. So I don't say a lot of the stuff I'm going to suggest is free, but anyways, I don't say that, I want to read 10 articles today. What I do is I say I want to commit to 3 hours of reading today, right? So whatever I accomplish within that 3 hours, I accomplish, and then I get up the next day and do it. And so I just try to stay consistent as opposed to setting an article limit, because I really believe in little by little is going to get it done, as opposed to like trying to crash and do it all at once.
Wow, this is amazing. So how to narrow down the search for literature? How did you do that? How do you narrow down?
What I wrote down on my answer for this one is refer back to my answers to number 2 and 3. These are the two answers to the previous 2 questions are good summaries for how I narrowed mine down. And also just going back to my major professor, taking the advice given, because there's always way too much. You actually want to get way too much, because once you have way too much, now you don't have any doubts about whether you have enough. And then you just want to narrow everything down closer and closer and closer to your actual research question, which also, I didn't really want to believe it when I was going through the process. I was like, nope, once I lock onto that research question, I ain't changing it, because I don't want to have to go through the whole process of, but it does happen, and it can actually help, because maybe what you've collected is actually better served by a slightly different research question. So the process is a challenging one, but you just got to keep sticking to it. And hopefully you have a major professor who you feel like is there for you 100%, helping you make sure you get through that process. And if you have that, then you'll be fine. Just keep going.
Mm-hmm. And to add to that, I would also say that you can narrow it down by population, maybe by methodology. So when when you're in the library, you're on a search, right? You're searching for what you want to study. Like my topic, for example, was math and social justice. So when that comes up, that brings like probably over 100,000 results back. So then I narrowed it down more to say, well, I only want to look at pre-service teachers. So then that takes out in-service teachers, that takes out mathematics teacher educators. And then I may narrow it down more specifically to say, I only want to look at algebra. So, identifying the population you want to look at, identifying the topic, and just continuing to drill down more and more and more. I would say you should have at least like 4 different keywords that you put into the search criteria that's going to help you to narrow it down more and more and more. So that would be my response.
Thank you. So I'm just trying to make sure that I'm not asking things that they already answered. So a person said, I'm working on a journal article. I'm just seeking a refresh on how to get started. And so what step-by-step process could be, and how much write should be done a week?
What I focus on when I'm doing a journal article is I try to find any article that closely relates to what I'm going to write on. And I want to make sure that there's not an article out there that I'm doing a duplicate of. Like if what I'm going to write about, I want to make sure if it's already written about so that I can read it very thoroughly and see if I need to reference it, or maybe what I plan on writing is not really something I want to write now that I see someone's already hit on those topics the exact way I did. So you want to save yourself that work. And then once you have found the gaps in other articles, chapters, books, everything that you may be referencing, everything that's going to go into that literature review, then I just start trying to come up with what is missing from there myself. They should also include in the end, you know, ideas that they see for filling those gaps. But what I would always do is try to actually figure out what I see fills those gaps, and then start to just have conversations with myself. I talk to myself, and then once I start answering myself, it might sound kind of weird, but once I start answering myself, then I start typing those conversations that I and we are having. And then from that, then the writing just starts to flow. And I know writing is not the same for everybody, but writing is a natural thing for me. I enjoy doing it. What I don't enjoy is being required to do it, which makes sense. That's why I ended up not going into academia, like writing when I actually feel the spirit move me. So that's the way it works for me. And it is different for all individuals. So all I can speak to is my experience.
Mm-hmm. I would say my experience is very similar. I would just add that, and you may have already said this, but just looking at articles that are similar to what you want to write and see what they've said about it. And you can kind of, if you think it's really good, you can model after that article, or you can see, you know, how you can change it. So that's all I have to say. Omar pretty much covered that. So.
Can I add one more thing? One thing I'm learning is that this process of writing is also messy, is messy. So just write. And after a while, after a certain time, you're gonna go back and structure better, read better, add things, cut things. So be okay of, this is a messy process and it's okay. It's part of the process. So that's what I'm learning through my own experience.
One more thing, there's also a book that a friend recommended to me because I was kind of having the same issue with starting an article. There's a book called How to Write Your Journal Article in 12 Weeks. And it's been really helpful. So that's a book that I recommend for anyone that's interested.
Thank you. So one question, do you think it's different, like write for your dissertation, write for your qualified exam, and write for your dissertation proposal? Do you think, is kind of like, was different for you?
Writing for the dissertation, writing for the qualifying exam, and writing for, what was the third one, journal article?
No, the proposal, because the qualified exam first, then after the proposal, and after the dissertation. So, and after collecting data, do you feel that was different? Like, because sometimes people say, oh, I'm gonna use my literature review from my qualified exam to go to my dissertation. But do you think, did you use or do you have to restructure your literature review? Did you have to rewrite? How do you feel? How was your process?
For me personally, it was all one thing. For me, it was stepping stones. Like, I was really working on my dissertation the whole time. I was working on the end goal. And once again, you're going to hear me say this numerous times. My major professor, he's actually, through that process, become a friend of mine. We keep up with each other. We check in on each other every so many months to this day, years after me finishing. The bond I built with him is what got me through. And through that connection, I would let him know where I was and what I was thinking. And then he would just guide me. And I was able to pull from the full dissertation only what I needed for the 2 steps prior, so that I could get through those steps and then get to actually finishing the dissertation.
And for you, Queshonda?
For me, well, I'll say in general, and then I'll say for me. So I know in general, for the qualifying exams, I had several options. I could do a literature review, I could do a pilot study, and I think there was another option. So I think it depends on what you choose to do for your qualifying exams. That's going to depend on if then you can use it for the dissertation. For me, I chose to do a literature review, which, like Omar, then helped me toward my dissertation. Now, I wasn't able to copy and paste the literature review I did for my qualifying exam to my dissertation, because a lot of the stuff I ended up cutting out. Because the way I did my literature review for my dissertation, for my qualifying exams, was more like a systematic literature review. And really, for your dissertation, you don't have to do a systematic literature review. So I really struggled in the area of writing my literature review. Even once I got to my proposal, I think I had to rewrite or restructure, I should say, my literature review several times for it to finally make sense. Like Omar said, that's why it's good to have the table, because all you have to do is move those pieces around. And so I did a lot of restructuring. However, the final literature review that I did for my proposal was the same as my dissertation. So I think they can all go hand in hand depending on how you write it.
Could you talk a little bit more about the systematic literature review? Because actually this is one of the questions.
Yeah, so from my understanding, a systematic literature review is more in depth. Like, you are collecting all of, so it depends on how you structure it, but a systematic literature review, from what I know, is you're collecting almost all of the studies based on your question, and you're looking at like the methodology used in the literature reviews. You're looking at the methodology from all of the different studies you collect. You're looking at the results. You're looking at like almost every aspect, depending on your question. Whereas with the dissertation, you don't necessarily have to get all of the literature from a particular topic. Your literature review is really like you're tailoring it to your particular research questions, your particular topic. So it doesn't have to be as in depth as systematic literature review. So someone else is saying,
yeah, they are asking if it's the same in the annotated literature review.
Is this the same as an annotated lit review? I'm not sure what an annotated lit review is, but I know an annotated bibliography is where you kind of summarize an article that you read. So if that's what you're saying, it's not that. It's still a literature review, but it's you're almost analyzing every aspect. So like for my qualifying exams, I talked about the results. First of all, all of the studies that I had, there was a section that looked at the methodology of all of the different studies. Like some were quant, some were qual, some were mixed methods. But then I also included a section that looked at all of the participants that all of the studies used, but I didn't do that in my dissertation. So I don't know if that makes sense, but
No,
it's
that's okay.
separate things. So a good book is 7 Steps to a Comprehensive Literature Review, the elements of a systematic literature review. There's also a book here that's it's called Writing Literature Reviews by Galvin, and they do a really good job of explaining how to write a literature review, but also the differences in a systematic literature review versus just a regular literature review that you would include in like an article.
Yeah, Christopher is saying here, Christopher Darby, he's saying a good book is 7 Steps to a Comprehensive Literature Review. And Sakari is saying, I use Key as SR for systematic literature review using those two strategies that Christopher said. And we're going to ask until questions until 7. So after I'm going to let everybody raise your hand and you can go and ask questions. But what was the best practice you used to paraphrase a qualitative research? And also connected, what's the struggles of being a qualitative researcher for you? And especially Queshonda is a mixed method. So, and I know Omar is a qualitative only. So could you share a little bit about your struggles being a qualitative and mixed method at the same time, but at the same time, the best practice you use to paraphrase a qualitative research? It's 2 quick questions in one.
Mm-hmm.
Ask it again, sorry.
No, okay. So for the first question is, what is, let me go again back. So what was the best practice for you to paraphrase? For example, you saw all those articles and sometimes we want to write about everything, and how we can paraphrase, summarize in a way that is very specific for what you want. Like, do you remember some of the strategies that you use for this to happen? That's the first question.
For me,
Respond to that while you're still thinking, Omar.
go ahead, thank you.
So, yeah, paraphrasing can be difficult, but the shortest answer I can say is just trying to reword what they said without exactly copying it word for word and then still citing it, right? So it wouldn't be a direct quote, but even paraphrases, you still need to cite. So I would just say, try to reword what they said. Like, for instance, because I'm looking at the question here and it's saying like for very specific findings. So let's say one of the findings is that 5 out of 7 pre-service teachers reported that they feel comfortable incorporating social justice into mathematics. So instead of saying 4 out of 7, you could say like the majority of pre-service teachers felt okay with using this teaching strategy. So it's sort of like you're rewording it. You're just rewording it. So that's what I would say. And citing it still.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to add, Omar?
If the question is just purely how do you paraphrase, is the reason that's so difficult for me is because I do it like all the time. Like, people get tired of me, like, you've already told us that, you've already said that. That's like something I've been hearing like my whole life, just in my general day-to-day life with friends. Because, and in fact, that's also how I learned that I was meant to be a teacher. Because, you know, in your classroom, you have all these different people that learn different ways. And so I would say something this way, and then I'd say it that way, and then I'd also say it that way. So paraphrasing just always came natural to me. What I did throughout my process, going back to what I said before, I started highlighting everything I was reading. I started selecting and through my skimming. And so then I would go back to different books and articles and chapters, and I would think of ways to put it in my own words. But then some things were just too powerful to use my own words. And that's when I would quote, like, this needs to come from this person who is the father of this particular art, or whatever the case may be. So that I don't want to diminish that power. So I want to make sure I quote that person here or there, especially if I'm quoting something that's longer. There's no way I can paraphrase it. I need to quote that whole entire section. So paraphrase as much as possible so that you're not overdoing it with quotes, and then focus on quoting stuff that you know there's no way for you to word it any better than the way it was put. And that's when I use quotes.
Yes. We have a question here about methodology, and methodology is going to be on next webinar because we have so much to cover. But come to the next one so we can answer your question. This one person asked, I need help formulating my research questions and applying the theory. So I think at least me too. I struggle with the research questions. So could you share a little bit about your experience, how your literature review connect to your research questions and how you apply your theory?
I can touch on it first. I also struggled with formulating my research questions. If you have not taken design or systematic studies, make sure you pay attention when you take that class, because I took it with Dr. Dedrick, and he does a really good job of, like, he has a whole PowerPoint, I believe, on formulating research questions. But again, one of the ways that helped me with formulating my research questions was when I was looking at the future research sections of other articles that covered my topic. I used some of those, and so that was one of the things that I did. I also looked for the gaps in the literature section at the end of some articles. And I use those to formulate my research questions. And some of my research questions were just basic, I think maybe even too basic. But those were the two strategies I used, just looking at other articles. But I still struggle with that. Like, is this an effective research question? What am I measuring, right? Like, what's the dependent variable? What's the independent variable? Those kind of things. So I still kind of struggle with that. So I don't know if you have anything to add.
Yeah, you just took me back to my, like I said, it's been some years for me. You just took me back. I'm liking you going first because I'm able to connect to my stuff by you reminding me of it. Let me first of all share a little bit of the story of how my dissertation came about for folks to understand why to understand the rationale behind what I'm about to say is very different from what Queshonda just now said. For me, I had the luck, I guess, of an opportunity presenting itself to join a parent-teacher organization at an elementary school that they wanted to have some conversations based on the fact that their children, especially their white children, the parents were trying to figure out how to talk to their kids about their children's reactions to what happened to Trayvon Martin. And as a result of that, and with my focus being on race relations and other things related to race, my major professor, he said, hey, I think this is a good opportunity for you. Come on out here and join him and a couple of more professors. And I was the only one who was a doctoral student, and the rest of them were all professors. And we sat in with these parents and we helped to guide them on having these very sensitive conversations. And then what happened in the next step was my professors, they all went back to their work at the university, and I took the lead in those conversations. And then from that, I ended up with smaller groups and eventually a pair of two and their families, which ended up being the ones that I interviewed for my qualitative study. So from all of that data I was gathering from all of those meetings over all those years, and it was like three years of going to those meetings and recording every single meeting, and then all that data just piled up and piled up and piled up, followed by me then having those individual meetings and the actual dissertation, the actual pilot program that led into my final program, from that came my question. Like the question came to me. It's like, what am I hearing here? What am I getting from this? What question can I ask in order to use this data? What am I hearing? So basically, I was hearing answers. I was hearing answers, which left me to say, so what question is being answered by this? How can this be used in the world of the literature that I've created? Because I picked and choose. Here are the three main things I see. So this literature goes with this area, this literature goes with this area, and this literature goes, you know, this long list of literature goes with each one of those. And then how do those three tie together? And then what am I really answering? And so then the research question came from that. So it was an iterative process, and it was supported by the three qualitative courses I took. You know, you have to take you're required to take a quant and a qual, and then you have to take a second one or the other, something like that. Am I right?
Qual, yeah, qual 1 and qual 2.
I did the two statistics, so I got my two quants, and I knew that wasn't the direction I was going to go in. I wasn't feeling that at all. You know, I actually got my grade actually improved. I had a better grade with stats 2 than I did stats 1, but that was because we worked as a team in the class. We really helped each other out to learn everything. But I knew that qualitative was my path, and then taking everything that I learned from those instructors and really listening and paying attention, and because I didn't know how I was going to work it out. I didn't know how I was going to write a dissertation. I was like really worried that, like, what am I going to write about? And it was that opportunity at that school that made it possible for me to go down the path that led to my dissertation and led to the research questions that came from all of that.
I love that. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, if I could piggyback on what Omar is saying, though some of you will have existing data, like maybe you're a part of a grant or you're a part of a team where you have access to data. And my dissertation partner was the same way, where she had access to data. And so she had to do the same thing that Omar did. She had to look at the data and say, what questions can I ask from this data? Right? Whereas me, the data didn't exist at all. And so I came in with questions. And so you can take either of those routes and formulate research questions. So I just wanted to highlight that. Because even once you graduate, if you continue to write after that, there's so many public databases that you have access to and can write about. And you go and look and you say, what research questions can I ask? So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, I love this, like sharing in my own. Sometimes, like, even when you go collecting data, when you go and collect the data, that's what happened to me too. My research participants, they start to share their stories with me, and that's when my research question now is different from my dissertation proposal. So it's okay, you change your research questions after you collect your data. So it's part of the process too.
Yeah.
So okay. So what are some of the best practices in coding and working in groups?
You start, Queshonda.
So I have a few. I absolutely love qualitative coding. I wouldn't necessarily say this is a best practice, but this is a practice. You can approach the data with codes, right, from the literature, right? So, and because one question asks, like, how do you develop themes? Well, you can come to the literature with themes and look for those specific things in the literature, right? So that's why they say you're looking at the data through a lens. So you can have a predefined lens that you're looking through. I feel like that's easier because you kind of know what you're looking for versus the other type of research where you kind of you just read through the data and you let the codes emerge. So both of those are two different types of, one is inductive, one is deductive, but I really like where you just come to the data with codes already, because then you know what you're looking for. Whereas the other way, which I did this, so I did a mixed methods study, right? So one of the research questions, I came to the data with codes. So, and the one best practice that I will say is that you put the code, you describe what the code is, and then you can give an example of that code from your data. So I would say that's a best practice, so people can see, like, what is it, how are you defining it, and give me an example from the data. And yes, it definitely does depend on, I see something in the chat.
And on your research.
Yeah, it depends on your research, yeah, how you approach it. So yeah, you can decide how you're going to approach it, and that could even be within the same study. So that's what I would say about coding. You got anything?
Yes, yes. I was frozen up because there was somebody specifically I wanted to speak about, and I just typed in the name and qualitative research, and it popped up, and I have the information right here, right now. I was introduced to Dr. Vanover, whose name is in the whole email thread with this press. He might have been the one that recommended you to contact me. I don't know, but that's my boy right there.
He's the advisor of the SOQM.
Okay, yeah, that's my boy right there. I met him when he was doing some. I'm a former performer. My first degree, my bachelor's degree, was music education. So I still love performance, and I was interested in finding out how, if there was any ties between performance and research. Mm-hmm. And so one of my professors, Dr. Augusto, introduced me to him. And she took me to this performance where his research was being performed, like on a stage with an audience. Mm-hmm. And that really got me, and I ended up later on doing some performance of some research of his myself, and we've written together. But anyway, the point I'm getting to is, he told me about an author of many, many qualitative research books, and he has some books on coding. His name is Johnny Saldana.
Yes, Johnny Saldana.
Yes, with the little thing over the end, Johnny Saldana. And when I read up on the way that he does his coding and the system that was in place, I was like, oh, that's it for me. That connection with the performance arts and my background in performance, there was a connection for me personally with that. And that's what got me to take what I had already designed myself to organize things into an even better systematic way of coding what I had already collected. And it refined what I already had and helped me to really reach that finish line with my dissertation.
Thank you. So I'm gonna open the space for people to raise your hand. So please start thinking about your question. So I'm gonna ask the last question here. I have more questions if you want to keep asking, but I want you to have the space to ask. So could you tell a little bit about, especially for Queshonda, making a literature review relevant and meaningful for most quantitative mind committee? So what was the challenge since you were doing a mixed method?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I saw that question, and my immediate response to that was, maybe you want to choose some qualitative people on your committee, because it's really hard to convince people who are like strictly all quantitative, hate qualitative, to kind of win them over. So I would say, especially in the dissertation phase, I would say choose, like, if you know, and also not even just because of what I just said, but you also want, if it's purely qualitative, you want others who sort of specialize in qualitative research to be able to give you feedback, to ask follow-up questions like, did you include your positionality? Or can I see a little bit more about how you coded this? So if you have people that are strictly quantitative, there may be some gaps that they may not even see because they're not as in tune with qualitative to begin with. So my answer to that would be, I would say, choose more qualitative people on your committee if they're going to be, if your dissertation is going to be qualitative. I had, on my committee, I did do mixed methods. So I had a person that was pure math. I had, and I had some, a professor that did a lot of qualitative work. So I would say choose your committee wisely, and be willing to restructure it if you need to fit what you're gonna need. So that'll be my response to that, Michelle.
I'm gonna reinforce the points that Queshonda has just now made. If you haven't heard this yet, and you should have already heard this by now, but I'm gonna let you know flat out. Your dissertation is the work product that you produce for your committee. The key point is that it's really the committee's dissertation. You just doing all the work for it. But you doing what they want. You doing what they feel is in the, so if you pick a quantitative committee and you want to do qualitative, and then at the same time, you're trying to fulfill the point that you're doing what they want. How are you going to do what they want when you want to do something that they don't want to do? But that they're, let's not say they don't want to do it. It's not their area of focus. It's not their strong area of interest. You want to work on something that they are fully committed to themselves.
Right.
You want to have a committee of people who you can go to each one of them individually and get feedback, support, guidance on what it is you're working with, not someone that's going to be like, well, you might want to talk to the qualitative person, not me. I mean, what good are they really doing in that case? I mean, okay, if you have one that's more focused in quant than qual, or two, or, but not the majority, not a committee that is opposing. And any one of the qualitative, at least, I'm not going to speak to the quant ones, any of the qualitative professors you speak to, they will tell you that they're, that mixed exists and you can do mixed and here's how you can do mixed. But to people who are just going into the process and starting and going into it, only way you should be doing something that's mixed is if what you're collecting calls for it. Not to go in with the mindset that I want to do both. That's not the norm. Usually you're either leaning in one direction or the other. To do both, really what you've collected calls for it, as opposed to you wanting to do both.
Right, like I hear Pete, like I read that there's been this ongoing struggle between quant and qual. So some say I'm a quant person, some say I'm a qual person, but really the work that you're doing is going to call for one or the other. It's not that you're quant or you're qual. If your research question that you're asking requires quantitative data, then you sort of have to use quantitative data or ask not quantitative data, like quantitative analysis. You have to ask a different question. So we can all be qual or quant depending on the questions that we're asking.
And for me, going back to what I was telling you about how my whole process started going into that parent-teacher organization, I mean, how else was it going to be anything but qualitative? It's just that's what was calling me. When I went and started participating with them, it felt natural to me. I felt like I was a part of that school. They looked forward to me coming out there and meeting with them every month. It was just natural. And so that was what I was pulled towards. That's what was, my dissertation was automatically going to be qualitative based on those roots. It was just the way it was.
So my last question before I open here the gallery, look at all those people, that's so exciting. What is the challenge of being a qualitative researcher?
Number one, it's time consuming. It's very time consuming. Number two, it's overwhelming. You can just become overwhelmed like, oh, I've interviewed these people. Now I want to interview them. Oh, I want to see the, how does this interrelate to that? Oh, now if I interview them also, I can really interview. And you just want to get more and more and more. And next thing you know, you spending 20 years working on a dissertation. So it can become overwhelming, but at the same time, even though that is challenging and it is very time consuming, the time consuming component is narrowing it down. Like, when is it enough? When do you go ahead and publish? And then when do you say, right? Because then you can build on what you published. And then you can actually reference what you published over and over to help get you some more sightings. And the thing is, when do you stop? It's part of the reason that I haven't gone back is because I know when I get in, I'm all in and I can't hardly do anything else. And so, yeah, it's very rewarding because I enjoy it. I enjoy writing, but at the same time, it's very time consuming and very, very overwhelming. But, some of us get joy out of it. I know I do, but it's something I just haven't gone back to because it's similar to my writing process. I'll spend months and months and months procrastinating, but then once I do go ahead and start, it's like a ball rolling downhill and I can't stop.
Yeah, I would agree. It's qualitative. You can just go on and on because there's always something else you can find in the data. So it's challenging yourself to know, when do I stop? Like, when have I reached saturation? And that's just a challenging place to come to. I had to decide with my dissertation, like, I'm done. I know there's more I can do. I know there's more I can find, but I'm gonna stop right here because I've spent enough time with it. And I think I've gotten all I can get. I know that there's some more, but I'm gonna just choose to stop here. So yeah, and then the subjectivity of it is just like, you sometimes feel like you're kind of making stuff up. Like, I know I'm seeing this, but am I really seeing this? And so that's where it's really nice to have somebody else look at your data. So I believe even with your dissertation, you can have a second person that codes, and then you can acknowledge them as I forget the exact terminology for it, but it's a way to establish iterator reliability and to say, like, we came to this agreement together. So, but yeah, like somebody said, there's no finite point that you stop at. So.
And I also want to tie back to something I said earlier about having the most ideal committee and the most ideal major professor. I wanted more participants in my study. In my mind, I pictured more participants in my study. And my major professor, he insisted, no, you can take just these 2 participants from the parent-teacher organization, and then from the 2 of them, you can have participants in their families. So therefore, I ended up with the 2 primary, and then one of them, his wife, and then the other one, her husband and her mother. So a total of 3 and 2 resulted in 5. But in my mind, I wanted more than just those 2 from that original parent-teacher organization. The thing is, I'm thankful to have a major professor who told me, no, stick to just the 2. And then from the 2, you can, so it was really teamwork, and it was having a good support system. And he's the one that actually said, okay, this professor is qualitative and focuses on this area or that area, which ties to your research. And this other person is qualitative and their area is also tied to your research in another way here. And based on his history with those professors and his relationships with those professors, which is what determines your completing that relationship with that committee. If you get a committee where the relationships are not united, that's what will delay you. That's what will result in you having to get new committee members and then postponing for multiple years at a time.
Yeah.
That is so highly important. Number one, remember, you're doing the work, but it's their dissertation. You're following what they say, what they want, what they see is best. So make sure you pick wisely, and making sure that they're going in the same direction that you feel comfortable in is highly important, especially the major professor, because the major professor is the key between you and the rest of the committee.
Mhm.
So I'm gonna let the room open. So if you wanna raise your hand and interact with us, and so you can also ask your questions, some of the struggles you are facing right now, trying to write a literature review, how it can help you based on your own experience here. So that's a moment of helping each other. So feel free to raise your hand and ask questions.
It looks like there's one question in the chat, Michelle, about citations.
Okay, let's see. More in the beginning?
No, right at the end.
Citations. Is it bad if you are citing within citation? That is, you don't have a direct quote and quoting a quote?
There's a specific way to quote a quote, and Queshonda's, you're in academia now. Maybe you can direct them to it, but I know that there's a specific way you can just look it up, and there's a specific way to do it.
Yeah, I posted the link to the APA form, the APA book. There's also an APA website that is really cool that you can type all of those APA questions that you have in. I'm gonna post a link to that as well. So let's see. But what comes to mind though when you say that? If you are reading an article, right, and the article that you're reading cites somebody, like quote somebody, you just need to quote, like your quote should come directly from the person that they're citing. You should go and read that or refer to that article that they're citing and just cite it directly. You don't have to say like as cited in this article. You just go directly to that article. And you want to make sure that the way that the person is representing it in the article that you're reading is representing it right. Because sometimes quotes are misrepresented. So that's why you want to always go back to the original source.
Yeah.
If all you're doing is quoting a specific quote, then what Queshonda is saying is absolutely on point. But my interpretation of the question was not, I'm putting a quote that someone else quoted someone else. In that case, follow exactly what she said. But what I was thinking of is when you're quoting someone and within that quote, they quote someone. That's what I was thinking about. That's when there's a certain way to do it and certain marks to put over what I think it's the one quote instead of the two quotes, all of that.
Oh,
that's what I was referring to. So we were covering two different things based on that same question. So yeah.
I see. But it's all in the APA book. So
yes.
Make sure you have that. That's like your Bible for writing. So
yep.
Interesting. One day I was talking to a friend and she was like, oh, my professor told me to quote myself all the time on my own dissertation. So how do you feel about that?
Can you clarify what you mean before I respond?
For example, I published an article in the past or should I quote myself?
Oh, I see.
So
yeah.
How do you feel like?
Yes.
Yeah. Why not?
Yeah. I actually spoke to this earlier when I was talking about knowing when to stop and then citing some of your past works on something you've already finished, adding to your cite quota, how many times you've been cited. It don't matter who cited you, whether it was yourself or somebody else. So yeah, get yourself cited, cite yourself.
Yeah.
Okay. So people have more questions? How are you doing writing your literature review right now, or you're getting ready for a qualify exam? If you have like one advice, if you only want like things Queshonda, go ahead, Queshonda.
So
The microphone is
relating to your
yours.
question, thank you. Relating to your question that you were just asking, when did you all know that it was time to defend your proposal and you knew you were ready to defend?
Girl, I feel like I just got pushed over the cliff. No, but I just, I was finished with the 3 chapters, and also it was just, I had a hard deadline. So one of the reasons I love my major professor is that she was really strict with deadlines. She's like, you have, I believe I had until May or so to submit my proposal to her. And so I created an outline where I was like, I need to be done with chapter 1 in January. I need to be done with chapter 2 in March, and chapter 3, I'm sorry, January, February, March, right? Chapter 1, 2, and 3, I needed to be done. So I just worked really hard to meet those deadlines. And those deadlines did get extended. But, just having that sort of as a guiding post helped me to know, like, I'm finished because I need to submit this to her. And I worked really hard as well to make it quality while trying to adhere to those deadlines. So
I tried to avoid the question of when do you know you're ready? That question itself is a question I completely avoided, because your own belief in yourself tends to be less than like your major professor and others around you who are like, come on, you got this. I know you're ready. This is a very overwhelming thing. If you wait until you're ready, you might be waiting way longer than you need to. You need somebody who is going to go ahead, not just push you in the pool, but somebody who's going to stand there with you by the pool and say, look, you got this, and convince you to go ahead and jump. So same as Queshonda just now said, I had a schedule set up. My major professor agreed with the timeline, and then I just stuck with it. Didn't matter whether I thought I was ready or not. The thing is, get as ready as I can to move forward on the dates that it says.
Exactly. And of course, you're along the way, you're getting feedback, right? So it's not like, or hopefully it's not like you get there and you haven't spoken with your major professor at all. You want to continue to get feedback. And sometimes that feedback is going to be like, scratch this, you need to start over. But you just kind of, revise and resubmit, revise and resubmit. And when you get there, you would have done it so much that you may still be nervous, but you'll be ready.
It's just like whenever you step on stage for a performance, no matter how you rehearse, you're all set. But once you get up there and the audience is in front of you, you're still going to be nervous. It's natural. The thing is making sure you've got a good committee, you got a major professor who you feel you have 100% trust in. And that major professor should only allow you to go forward when he or she knows you are ready.
Right.
It's not about you. You don't know. You ain't ever gone through this. They know better than you know. When that major professor says you are ready, you've got this, then you say, okay, I trust in what you're saying. Let me go ahead and get in the water and make these and get this lap across here.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah,
So,
go ahead.
No, I was just thinking about if there's a question there. Go ahead, finish. Don't worry.
Okay, I was gonna say, Delquanda, also regarding the literature review specifically, I also created a schedule. So I'm sharing that now. So not my literature review, I'm sorry, my qualifying exam, which was a literature review, I was assigned it September 20th and it was due October 20th. So what I did was I went week by week and said what literature I wanted to pull and synthesize. And I tried to follow this schedule as much as possible. I get overwhelmed really quickly, but when I sit down and I make a plan, that helps me to tackle it one at a time. So like I was saying, little by little will produce an entire product. So I would also say, make a plan and try to stick to that plan as much as possible.
Well, like Michelle said earlier, you are our shero. and through life, because life continues to happen, right? And families expand, and just watching you in that journey, I'm like, oh my goodness, how is she balancing all of this? Girl, you are fierce. So I definitely appreciate being your classmate and watching you and leaning on you and just trying to channel some of that energy to keep it moving. Because
You got this.
this is
You got
definitely a
this.
hard journey. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And you got this.
Hey, Michelle, let me say something that I'm thinking of based on what I just heard being said. That relationship that she has with Queshonda, and then the relationship that you have with Queshonda, I had the same thing with those who had just recently graduated. And then I also had the same thing with those who were right behind me. If you're on here listening right now and you don't have that, you need to start working on that network, because
Yes.
that is what got me through, and we pull each other through. To this day, right now, there's only one person out of my group of people who were a year or two or three ahead of me and a year or two or three behind me. Out of that group that I became really, really, really close with, all of us have finished except one of us. And I just found out that one person who didn't finish, like, so many years went by, so now he has to go back and like make up some of the classes because so many years went by. He's actually gone back and he's getting back in so that he can move towards finishing. All the rest of us, we got done, and we support each other. Even after each of us got through, we still continue checking on the person who hadn't got through. That makes a big difference. You're having that relationship with Queshonda, that's highly important. For those of you who don't have that, find that, get that. Meet some folks that are a year or two behind you, because you're helping them will help you.
Exactly.
I love this. Love this. I don't know, Queshonda, if you want to add anything.
Yes, I just echo that. Michelle, Delquanda, like so many people in the USF program I was connected with. Some were behind me, some were ahead of me that graduated, and I use them as a resource, and I allow others to use me as a resource, and we all kind of get through it together. So I echo that. And I've been able to, keep up and be able to do what I did with completing my dissertation, because I actually wrote with others. I wrote with my friends, Michelle's one of them, and several other people that we actually would get on and we would write together. So Michelle actually posted a link of a writing group that she hosts. And so I encourage you to get on and be a part of that, because sometimes it's hard to write by yourself too. So
yeah. No, it actually, Donna, we have is a Facebook group that you can, I just put the link there, and I'm so thankful. Queshonda, when she was in the process, we wrote together, but now she's in a different life now, and I'm still here trying to finish my dissertation. So now I try to find, because writing groups were so important for me. Like Queshonda was every day, we text each other like, oh, we are writing. But I know she's now in a different stage of her life. So I try to find a different writing group. So I just post the link there, and actually Dana, she's here with us today, and we are there every single day. Like, I'm now writing every day from 5 a.m. until, like, I know I'm crazy, but I'm a morning person, but there are people, it's an international group from all parts of the world where we are writing together, we are supporting each other together, and everybody's in different stages. Some are still taking classes, some are in their postdocs, some of them write their dissertation right now, some of them just graduated. So having a writing group is, I meet them every single day. Like today I couldn't because I was working the whole day, but tomorrow I'm there with them every morning. So you don't feel lonely, you don't feel alone in that process. And if you have doubts, sometimes I have questions about my methodology, I'm just go there and I ask them, and they give me so many feedbacks. Now I'm working on other things and they give me different perspectives that I never saw before. Queshonda, when I needed her help, she was there always to help me, and we are there supporting each other. So I believe a lot in finding our people, because it's very easy to get unmotivated, but if you are there with people who are doing the same time writing with you, and I'm there with them every single day. And sometimes one is texting like, oh, I'm jumping right now on Zoom. Who wanna write? So everybody starts jumping together. So you don't feel lonely. Actually, it's fun. Like I think they are part of my family like now. So and that's so that's a little bit about. So sorry, I'm just talking. But if people have more questions, sometimes I talk too much.
while people are thinking, I also want to share one more thing. So in addition to having being a part of a writing group, I would also say have an individual plan. So this is another resource I'm going to share with you. So I had my own individual plan once I finished my proposal. So this plan is from my proposal all the way to graduation. So I started my, once I finished my proposal, from May 17th, 2021, all the way down to December, every day I tried to put, well, not every day I tried to put something on the schedule, but I mapped out everything. So like going to the top, right? I said, you know, these days I wanted to analyze the data for the participants. Then I said, you know, for these days, for this research question, I wanted to analyze the data. For this research question, I wanted to analyze the data. So very, very specific, achievable daily goals. And so even, you know, right here, write up the results for chapter 4. Submit chapter 4 to my professor, write up the discussion. So I planned out these days so that I will have specific goals all the way down to the ETD stuff. I just put ETD stuff, but that's, you know, the formatting that you need to be able to submit the dissertation. And then deadlines, those graduation deadlines are really important. And then remember, you need to plan time in for revisions. So you need to put that in there. And then you have to allow time for your professors to respond. You want to have your graduation deadlines, your registration deadlines. Like, you need to put all of this down so that you don't forget, because it's so easy. And then even for the defense, you want to plan in practice days. I read somewhere that you need to do your defense at least 6 times before you actually do it. That way you kind of have it memorized. So I tried to plan all of this stuff down to the day that I graduated. And I think that'll kind of help you. So even when you're not following it, right, you can go back to that as an anchor to get back on track. So I shared that as well as a link. Hopefully it's, make sure it's shared for everybody. So, so I just wanted to share that as well.
No, this was amazing. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, so 2 things that came to mind while listening to Queshonda. One is formatting. If I forget to go back to it, remind me to go back to formatting. But the other thing is ETD and networking. I highly advise you attend that ETD like conference
Session.
training thing. What's it called?
Yeah, it's a session, ETD session.
Go attend that ETD session like soon. Just, I mean, it's just one evening of your time, like an hour or 2 of your time. Just go to the very next one, and then go to the next one, and just go to the next one, because they only offer them like once per semester. Go soon so that you can get an idea of what's going on. The formatting question that was listed, in regards to formatting, you can get everything formatted perfectly from the beginning and then continue to develop your dissertation as it goes, knowing that it's formatted properly. Or you can do like me and wait to the very end and then go back and fix everything formatting wise. Because for me, I wrote it the way it seemed like it was right to me. I looked at, I looked at the formatting from some other dissertations, and then I formatted based upon what I saw. But then actually what you see is not exactly right. And they're going to go in there and make sure that it's exactly to the millimeter here and there and all of that. So that can be done at the very end. Like, I had already defended my proposal. I had already reached the point where I was at the fight. Even if you've already defended your dissertation, you still have to go in and get all that formatting done before they will accept it. So you don't really need to be worried about formatting right now. But what I would do is start attending those ETD sessions so that you fully understand what is going to be expected of you, so that it's not a shock or a surprise when you reach that point. Going back to my other thing, what was it I said? Don't let me forget.
The format.
Okay, so I went back to the formatting. The networking is highly important in regards to building it all. Queshonda, when you were talking about, what it came to mind was what I did, which was I went to a colleague's defense and I helped my colleague. She was ahead of me and I took notes for her. And then I'm like, I'm a pretty good typist, and I typed up notes and I provided her notes, because of course, when you're sitting in there, you freaking out. Just know that in advance. You're gonna be freaking out. You can't take your own notes. Find somebody from your network that's close with you to take notes for you, as if they're you. Like, here's what they told you. Here's what they told you. Professor so-and-so said you need to do this. This other professor said you need to do that. Have someone else take those notes for you. You're not going to remember that stuff, and you're not going to be able to take notes for yourself, because you're going to be in freak out mode.
Adrenaline rush.
Because of the pressure that's on you at that time. But the person that I did that for, she did that for me. So when you build that network of people, then y'all all look out for each other, doing things for each other, especially like taking notes for one another. Not to mention, oh, I know what it was that made me think of it, Queshonda, when you were saying practice it multiple times before you do it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The person that I practiced with was the person who was taking my notes.
Oh, wow, that's awesome.
Therefore, she knew what I was going to say, and she was able to focus on what my professors were saying, not on me, because she had already heard me go through it so many times.
Mm-hmm.
And she better understood, like if you have someone taking your notes that doesn't really know what you're talking about, then when the responses come to you from your professors about what to do, the person who's typing might be a very good typist, but they don't really understand the really contextual point of what you're being told to do, or how it connects with your research. So therefore, the notes that they take are not going to be as crystal clear as someone who fully understands. A person is going to understand much better who sat through your going through it multiple iterations before that. So I highly recommend, from your network, finding someone who's willing to sit there and be there for you, somebody trustworthy who you really know is going to be there. Not, oh, I got caught up and I didn't make it, I don't want that person. So
yeah. So just to respect people's time, I just want to ask the last question, because also one thing I'm facing right now is I wrote like sometimes for 6 hours, 7 hours straight, and I feel like I still need to be in front of my laptop the whole time writing. And my other side say, no, you need a balance. You need to take care of your health. You need to take care of yourself. You need to eat. So how did you find a balance during that process? And you took care of yourself and your family, and how, just the last advice for our guests, for our community here.
I'll go quickly and I'll say again, making a plan and trying to stick to that plan, but creating a plan that fits the needs of your family. So like Michelle, like when we used to meet during the dissertation time, I said I could meet from 8 o'clock at night into the night. Sometimes we would be up to 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning working, but I knew that my kids were sleeping at that time. And so I would just say making a plan and trying to stick to that plan. So planning for those mental health breaks, because even if you work past what you need to do, like past what your mind can take, it's fruitless at that point anyway, because you're not going to be producing good work if you can't really even focus on what you're doing. So making a plan that fits the needs of your family and includes mental health breaks, that's what I would say.
Thank you.
Omar?
Be faithful, whatever your faith is, hold on tight to it. They always tell you about the percentages of divorces and all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But those are just like numbers, and you hear it like, no, not me and all this. And my wife and I went into the process together, both committed to it. But when I returned back to Saudi Arabia, I was over in Saudi Arabia and I came back to defend, and she was there on video. And when I got back to Saudi, I hadn't felt a hug from her like that. Like I literally could not remember. And I didn't realize the toll the process had taken on my relationship until that moment. I really didn't. And you got to have some faith, and it should be something that both of y'all want.
Right.
Because you don't feel it when you're in the middle of it. Just like anything, really. You don't recognize the toll it's taken. You committed to it and you want it, and you keep pushing for it and you're going for it. And no matter how much you consciously try to bring balance, it's still a heavy weight. And you'll just like with anything, like when you stop taking the medicine, you don't realize, like, oh, this medicine ain't doing me no good. Then when you stop taking it, you're like, oh crap, it was doing some good. It's very similar. You don't realize how much it was weighing on you until it's over. So hopefully you hold on to your faith throughout the whole process.
Thank you so much for sharing your stories and take out the time to come and talk to us today. I don't have words to express how I'm thankful for your time today and for everybody who signed up and came. And that's very exciting, our first event. So thank you so much. I'm going to stop recording and